I want to go over the Hillsong documentary because I watched this thing, guys, and it was pretty interesting. I want to give you kind of the full kind of review, if you will, of this documentary, but you can go get a free subscription to Discovery Plus and you can watch it yourself. There's 3 episodes and that you can get it 1 week free. And if you want to go further than that, certainly feel free to, but that's what I did. I went on and I watched it, and I was only going on just to catch that real quick. And so here's a couple of takeaways, and I'm going to start with the pros to begin with here. So the first thing, the doc does a decent job of kind of digging into celebrity culture, and it doesn't really go deep enough with this in my mind, because this is really kind of one of the stories, is like what happens when you mix celebrity with church. But at least it highlights that so that you can kind of think about that for yourself, because I definitely think that one of the most prickly predicaments of the modern day megachurch movement is the phenomenon of celebrity pastors. And so it does also go into the megachurch movement. So that's another thing that I think is important. So I do believe in evil pastors that are predatory, yes. But more importantly, I believe in weak people. I believe in original sin, that people are wicked and that people long to do things that are bad from time to time, and that we have the capacity, if nothing else, we have the capacity for sin inside of us. And so the megachurch movement is a big movement with lots of money. And again, I think they could do a better job of digging into this reality, but the reality is that becomes a very troubling and problematic reality when we're talking about keeping our noses clean and trying to make sure that we have good ethics and we don't sell out the goals and the mission and the vision of the church and all of that thing. Because inevitably, undoubtedly, the bigger a church gets, the more cause there is for concern over losing the message and losing the mission and losing scriptural truth. So I think that there's something to be thought about there, and at least the megachurch movement has a little bit of a light shined on it so that we can think about that. Again, they could do a better job there. And then the final thing I'll say about this is that there are real people who were abused by people in the Hillsong movement, and that story needed to be told. So I'm really, really happy that was done. I think this is probably the most important thing, is this was not some big expose that exposed Hillsong and brought people to justice. This is after the fact from those things, but it's good to know that those people can tell their story. So now the cons. So the people interviewed very often in this documentary very often showed personal grievances. And by that I mean they let their biases oversimplify what took place at Hillsong. This is a very important point. I know it's a little bit nuanced perhaps, but it's very important. Since you can't know the sources that you're hearing from in documentaries and check it, you have to use the smell test. So if the reporting may have an overt bias, then you know you won't get the story that you really need to hear. So look beyond statements that you hear in the documentary, like they have one goal, and that's to get as much of your money as they possibly can. Now, is that really true? Is that really true? Like even for Brian Houston, is that really what he was starting a church for, is just so that he could steal all of your money? What I'm trying to paint here is that there was probably other things that were going on other than just the idea that Brian Houston just wanted your money and that's all they were doing. No, you're oversimplifying the story just because you're mad or something like that. The real story is important enough and frankly dark enough that you don't need to embellish it with your personal grievances about a church and how much money they make. I mean, there's large corporations. If you're just going to rail about how much money they make, you can do that, I guess. But the second thing is that the Lentz aspect of the story really kind of shows this, that they really want this to be like a Scientology cult story. But it's really just about a bad pastor who flew too close to the sun. It's about a dude that made it to the top and needed something else to conquer, and a double life was what he turned to. This is a common story among powerful men that find fame and then finally realize it's deeply unfulfilling. Now that's a powerful story to tell. But that's not the story the doc follows. It follows some crazy trails in an attempt to uncover conspiracies that don't exist and to prove some type of manipulation that didn't exist. Even at one point, they call like the church's mandate, Hillsong's mandate, to reach the world for Jesus, some type of globalist agenda to take over the world. That's their suggestion. But it gets worse. There's a personal story that a girl tells about having premarital sex and being a volunteer at the church, and then she meets with Carl really early on in his ministry, and then he gives a biblical stance to the behavior. I mean, the one time he actually does something good, he's accused of cultic behavior. So she's mad about the fact that he rebuked them for that. And I'm sorry, when volunteers at a church are having premarital sex and are dismissed from their positions and encouraged to practice celibacy, whether you like that or not, that is kind of what we believe. So the point is that the doc and docs like these can become such witch hunts that the subjects can say perfectly reasonable things, and then the worst interpretation can be given to that thing that they say. But it does bring me to the close of the show with this one thought. The purpose and redemptive nature of a documentary film is to show the breakdown of personal responsibility. Now think on that. All good docs show personal responsibility that has been lost somewhere. That's what a really good doc does. It's not to expose the rich for just because they're rich or to condemn the religious. It's to bring us back all to fiscal responsibility and to restore faith in authentic religion. Now, perhaps in doing this, we'll find that we need some personal responsibility ourselves because we have a deep desire for purpose. And where does that deep desire for purpose come from? Well, it was created in us. We were created for something and for someone, by the way. And that's why this Hillsong doc is not Christianity today. Hillsong was not representing Christianity, but I don't think the documentary does either. But you can. And here's how you can. You can speak up on issues that cause people to contemplate their role in society and their personal responsibility on issues that matter. Those are the things that we should speak up on, things that demand personal responsibility. Because by the way, in so doing, not only are you discussing a universal truth that the whole world needs to realize, but you're also doing one other thing. Maybe you didn't even realize you were doing it. When you issue forth the mandate of personal responsibility on issues, personal responsibility for your finances, personal responsibility for your home, personal responsibility for your nation and the culture, when you issue forth that, what you're actually going to find is that, well, now we're going to have to agree upon a standard, maybe some ethics, some values by which we can say these are things that we need to agree upon if we're going to have a healthy society. And I'm just going to tell you two building blocks. Fiscal responsibility is one of them, as we've already talked about, and marital fidelity is one of them too. Marital fidelity within a relationship that produces another generation. So in other words, a marriage relationship between a man and a woman. Marriage. I hesitate to say traditional marriage because we're just talking about marriage. Real marriage, as it has always been defined, is a building block of society. So what am I trying to say? Is that as we dig down into personal responsibility and speaking out on these things that we need to be personally responsible for, what you're actually doing is you're affirming Christian truth. Now, I know for some of you atheists and agnostics, that may be a little unsettling to you, but if you push aside the ad hominem for a moment and you actually consider Christianity and its role in society, how it was a building block for our American experience early on, and how erosion continues to happen the more and more we move away from it, you may actually have to realize that there's some pretty redemptive and beautiful stuff that we can learn from Christianity.
You can catch brand new episodes of Indie Thinker with Reed Huberman every Monday and weekly bonus episodes to keep you thinking throughout the week. But you have to subscribe and click the bell to be notified when new episodes drop. If you enjoy this content, make sure to like this video and share it with friends.